all about stress. Let's talk about what stress is before we move on to the healing. What is stress? This is the obligatory definition slide. There are lots of different definitions about stress, actually. The American Institute of Stress, which, first of all, by the way, the fact that we have an American Institute of Stress in this country says a lot. We've actually created an institute to help study and deal with our stressors and help teach us how we can be less stressed. So the American Institute of Stress defines it simply as physical, mental, and emotional tension or strain. Very basic definition. The National Institutes of Occupational Safety and Health, which govern occupations, define them as demands of a job being more than the individual in that job can process or cope with. There are lots of different definitions. What's important is we know it when we feel it, right? When you feel stress, we all can define it. We all know what that feels like. 76%, that's a big number. 76% cite money and work as the leading cause of their stress. Now, if I had been doing this research, I would probably have teased those out because work and money are different, right? We obviously work for money, to earn money, but they are not the same thing. We have all sorts of stressors at work that we have to cope with, and then we have different stressors around money. And as long as people have enough money, if you've ever heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the first need we have is safety. And as long as you have enough money, you have that feeling of safety. So that doesn't necessarily have to do anything with work. And you can earn a lot of money and still feel a lot of stress. So diving down into the reasons behind the stress at work, you can see that workload, 36%, that's a major reason that people respond to stress at work. Another major reason is juggling work and home priorities. That's 20%. If you add those two together, over half of the stress that people are feeling has to do with work-life balance. 8% reported lack of job security. That's interesting. What I find really interesting, though, are people issues. 31% of people reported that other people are the source of their stress. If only all those other pesky people in the world would just go away, we would be fine. It reminds me of, there was a television show years ago where the protagonist was granted wishes and he could choose anything he wanted. And he chose as one of his wishes world peace. And at that moment, boom, everybody else in the world disappeared. And he was left alone in the middle of a city street. And that really struck me as really poignant. I thought, wow, okay, that's the way to have world peace, is to have nobody else to interact with. Well, unless we are working for ourselves, by ourselves, paying ourselves, and have no clients, we are going to have to interact with other human beings. So these tools and techniques I'm going to teach you will give you some ways to process through stressors, including other human beings. What has been found through research is that there's a big emotional perception to stress as well. Now, here's a police officer. We would expect police officers to be stressed. That's a very stressful occupation, a very high, tense, high-pressure situation that they're in on a regular basis. In fact, so much so that large municipalities like New York and Los Angeles have actually gotten to the point where they will reimburse a police officer's coronary event, what they call a coronary event, a heart attack, even if that police officer is not on the job at the time. Even if the police officer is away fishing on vacation, if the police officer has a heart attack, those municipalities will compensate that officer and his or her family. Just knowing that the baseline level of pressure and stress that those officers feel day to day on their job is huge. One of the interesting research studies that I saw when preparing this presentation was one with police officers, though. And they asked police officers, what do you find more stressful? Do you find catching criminals more stressful or completing paperwork more stressful? And what was amazing to me was how many of them, many of them said paperwork is more stressful to me than catching criminals. That is clearly different than what I anticipated. And yet, it kind of makes sense because to them, they got into being a police officer in the first place expecting to catch criminals. They did not expect to be spending large number of hours during each of their days filling out paperwork about catching those criminals, and yet that's part of their job. So 100 of us could be exposed to the same exact stressors and experience them entirely differently. For some, catching criminals is stressful. For others, filling out paperwork is stressful. Some of us don't mind getting up in front of others and speaking. For others, that's one of the most scary things that exists in their life. It's right up there with death. In fact, a lot of my clients come to me because they're afraid of public speaking. They break out in the cold sweat. They're really worried about how they're going to handle things. So the American Institute of Stress has changed the definition of stress to incorporate the emotional demands that go along with stress. They say now it's the demands being made on an individual versus that individual's sense of control or capacity in dealing with those demands. So can that individual mobilize the personal, social, and emotional resources that they need to deal with whatever stressors they're having? These data are very interesting to me and also quite scary. 33% of respondents to the American Psychological Association's Stress in America survey reported feeling extreme levels of stress on a regular basis. That's a third of respondents who are a representative sample of people in the United States. More concerning is approximately 3/4 of people said that they regularly experience physical and psychological symptoms in response to stress in their lives. This is not sustainable when 3/4 of us are experiencing actual physical dis-ease or disease or mental health issues as a result of our stress. Something has got to change. And due to the fact that we cannot change the entire rest of the world, we can't wish them all away, we have to change our emotional response. And I did promise to share with you today, if you've been following me on social media for the last couple weeks, I've been giving little clues and hints about what I would talk about today. I promised to share today what the most stressful job in America is. And the hint is that the annual pay is only $26,802. The answer is enlisted military personnel. This is not surprising, right? We would expect, like police officers, we would expect enlisted military personnel to feel large amounts of stress on a regular basis. They're constantly putting themselves in harm's way. I thank them for their service because it really is a stress on them and their families. So that's not surprising. What was surprising to me, though, is when you round out the top 10 of the most stressful jobs. You can see here we have number 10, taxi driver. Number 9, senior corporate executive. 8, public relations executive. 7, news reporter. 6, event coordinator. 5, broadcaster. 4, they're those police officers we discussed earlier. 3, airline pilot. 2, firefighter. And number 1, as we said, the enlisted military personnel. What's interesting to me, though, remember previously we saw the 76% cited work and money as their most difficult stressor. But pay doesn't have anything to do with stress. Nothing. The median annual salaries, as long as you have enough to live on, let me clarify that. The median annual salary ranges for these 10 jobs ranged from $24,880 for taxi drivers to $111,930 for airline pilots, followed closely by public relations executives. And senior corporate executives are up there too. That's the 3rd highest paid. But they're all experiencing a lot of stress, and they're reported as being the most stressful, despite the fact that the salary ranges vary widely.